After years of bullying, I filmed my stepbrother and had him expelled. My whole family now wants me to claim that I fabricated the video in order to protect his future. For the past year, my 17-meter stepbrother Jonathan has been tormenting me at school, and yesterday it simply blew over. This is a fairly twisted-up issue, so let me give you some history before I tell you what occurred. 3 years ago, at the annual dinner of her work, my mom met Jonathan's father, Harris, who is 45 years old. My father died in a vehicle accident when I was 5 years old, and my mother has been raising me alone ever since. Before she met Harris, she had a few dates but nothing committed. He seemed to genuinely care about her, and was pleasant and accomplished. Before getting married, they dated for around a year. About 6 months into their relationship, Harris organized a dinner where I first met Jonathan. At first, Jonathan appeared to be okay. He was quiet but kind. After supper, we even played video games together, and I recall thinking that maybe having a sibling wouldn't be that horrible. Being an only kid has always left me feeling lonely at times, to be honest. After the wedding and when we all moved in together, everything was different. The initial weeks were uncomfortable but doable. Then, when our parents weren't there, Jonathan began to say these insignificant things. He would say things like my mom is a successful marketing executive, my dad was basically my mom's meal ticket, or I was probably desperate for a father figure. My grandma gave me a number of photo albums, and I have wonderful recollections of my dad. I initially attempted to ignore it, assuming he was simply getting used to the new circumstances. However, the remarks continued to deteriorate. He would ridicule me for keeping my dad's photos in my room, telling me that I should move on since his father was now my father. He would tell me that I was fortunate that they even allowed me to live in their home since, in reality, Harris had purchased it. They had sold both of their previous residences to do so. When I attempted to bring this up to my mother, she would respond that I was very sensitive and that Jonathan was only attempting to get used to having a new family member. Jonathan's move to my school at the start of this school year was the beginning of the true horror. Our parents believed that having us attend the same school would foster brotherly bonds. Jonathan is a regular child who is popular. He essentially controls the social scene, plays football, and has a large circle of friends. I'm more interested in academics and computer programming, and I have a few pals who are also interested in these things. At school, Jonathan began spreading all these tales about me. He claimed that I weep myself to sleep, wishing for my deceased father, although I don't, that I frantically attempt to get Harris approval, that I genuinely avoid him out of respect for my father's memory, and that I'm envious of him, since he has a biological father. Because they had heard about my emotional problems. Even strangers would approach me and ask if I needed a hug. Physically, it began modestly. In the corridors, he would run into me and say it was an accident. With a phony voice that made his pals laugh, he would knock over my books and apologize. However, things worsened. In the cafeteria, he once unintentionally spilled his energy drink all over my laptop. All of my programming projects were stored on the laptop. Additionally, the laptop itself was destroyed, even though I was able to rescue the hard disk. Jonathan pretended that it was an accident and offered to let me use his old laptop when I told Mom and Harris. They told me I was exaggerating the situation because they thought he was right. Even my mom's sister, my Aunt Sarah, who used to be very close to me and would always support me, began to advise me to make a greater effort to connect with Jonathan. She would remark things like, "You're too sensitive, just like your father was, and he's just being a normal teenage boy." My dad was always my hero, so having her point the finger at me in that final remark was incredibly hurtful. Things drastically worsened around a month ago. After gym class, Jonathan and his pals cornered me in the boys' locker room. They knocked off my glasses and pushed me about, but they weren't beating me, and mocking my inability to even defend myself like a true guy. I decided I'd had enough at that point. When Jonathan was around, I began surreptitiously filming everything on my phone. I was desperate, even though I realized it might not be the correct thing to do. When I told them what was going on, they didn't believe me. I got just what I needed 2 weeks ago. Tommy, a freshman, was being harassed by Jonathan and his pals. Tommy is rather bashful and little for his age. He attempted to jump and catch his bag as they threw it over his head in a game of keep away. He was being referred to by their names, saying something like, "Short stack, what's wrong? Unable to get there?" I took notes on everything. Jonathan went too far, though. Jonathan became enraged and gave Tommy a strong shove when he eventually succeeded in grabbing his luggage. Tommy's nose got bloodied after he collapsed and struck his face against a locker. I went directly to the principal with the footage. Despite their generally lax enforcement of our school's zero-tolerance policy for bullying, they were unable to ignore it when they discovered video proof of real physical attack. By the end of the day, Jonathan was formally discharged from school when they phoned Harris to come get him. Everything blew out when we got home that afternoon. Jonathan sobbed to his father about how his life had been wrecked, how he would never be able to attend a reputable university, and how this would damage his chances of receiving a football scholarship. Harris yelled at me, accusing me of betraying my family and claiming that I was only jealous of Jonathan's success. The worst thing, though, my mother sided with them. In fact, she advised me to visit them first rather than the principal first. She said that by going behind their backs, I had betrayed my family and that in order to get Jonathan back into school, I had to admit to the principal that I had altered the tape or something. Mom began to cry when I refused and attempted to tell them about all the bullying I had experienced. She said I was ending her marriage and that I should put my family's needs first. Then, 4 months before my 18th birthday, Harris threatened to throw me out. I contacted my grandma, Dad's mother, because I could take it no longer. I've been staying with her ever since she came to get me that evening. My mother is always phoning and messaging me, alternating between accusing me of ruining our family and threatening to ruin my future as well. I'm being called a snitch by several of my classmates. However, I'm getting gratitude from other people who have also been bullied by Jonathan. I know what I did was correct, therefore I don't regret anything, but now everything is in such disarray. The worst thing is that my mother, who has always encouraged me to confront bullies, is now telling me that I should have remained silent. AITA? Update 1. I would first want to express my gratitude to everyone who left a remark on my last article. All of the encouragement has been so overwhelming that I wanted some time to take it all in before posting. A lot has transpired during the last 2 weeks, and they have been intense. My mom unexpectedly showed up at my grandmother's place the day after I posted. Despite her displeasure, my grandma let her entry. Mom seemed awful, as if she hadn't had any sleep in days. When she first met me, she broke down in tears and said she wanted to make amends since she had failed me as a mother. I felt sorry for her for a second. She then mentioned Jonathan. She said she understood why I did what I did, but I had to realize that this was a situation that may affect Jonathan's entire future. It seems that they attempted to enroll him in 3 different schools within our district after he was dismissed from our school. Because of the bullying episode, he was rejected by all of them. I just shared the video with the principal, but it somehow got out there, and suddenly Jonathan was being called a violent bully. Jonathan was reportedly despondent, seldom eating, and always talking about how his life was over, according to Mom. She informed me that he may now be turned down by universities since he had lost his shot of a football scholarship. She repeatedly reached for my hand during our conversation, but I resisted. She was still attempting to make me feel bad about defending myself, and I couldn't believe it. After sitting silently in her armchair through all of this, my grandma eventually said something. She revealed to me something I was unaware of. My dad had experienced terrible bullying throughout his high school years. He seemed to be quiet, interested in school, and a simple target for bullies. Much like myself at my age, it became so severe one day that he ended up with a fractured arm and was admitted to the hospital. He had been shoved down a set of steps by the bullies. According to my grandma, the event altered him. He was then resolved to never allow bullies to get away with causing harm to others. He always taught me to advocate for others and myself because of this. I did something that she claimed he would have been proud of. Defending Tommy, that freshman, as well as myself. My mother dropped the true bombshell as I was still absorbing this new information about my dad. She broke down in tears and said that the previous evening, Harris had given her an ultimatum. Jonathan would file for divorce if I admitted to manipulating the video, and wrote a statement claiming that I had fabricated everything to get him back into school. She pleaded with me to help her keep her marriage together, stating that she couldn't endure another broken relationship. What I was hearing was unbelievable. In order to save her husband from abandoning her, my own mother asked me to lie and accept responsibility for everything. My grandma must have noticed my surprise because she instructed my mom to go right away. She claimed that a mother didn't deserve to be called a mother at all if she asked her child to accept responsibility for their own mistreatment. My grandma handed me a collection of letters my dad had written to me before he passed away after Mom left. She believed I needed them immediately, even though they were meant to be presented to me when I turned 18. In one of them, written a week before his accident, he expressed his desire for me to always stand up for what's right, regardless of the opinions of others. He discussed in his writing that having courage does not equate to being fearless, but despite being afraid, doing morally. In the meanwhile, education has become more difficult. I've been the target of internet harassment from Jonathan's buddies who have been sharing manipulated pictures of me with hurtful remarks and spreading false information about my mental instability and how I made things up to get attention. Unexpectedly, though, Tommy, the freshman Jonathan had harassed, spoke up and shared his own experience. Tommy informed the principal of further instances in which he had been harassed by Jonathan. Then more children began to come forward, like dominoes dropping. Some even have recordings of themselves. One female had recorded being harassed about her weight by Jonathan and his buddies for weeks. Screenshots of Jonathan harassing him and threatening to tell everyone we're in the possession of another man. Yesterday, I was summoned into the school counselor's office. A big folder containing complaints about Jonathan from the previous year that had been misplaced or disregarded was presented to me by her. She asked whether I would be prepared to assist in establishing an anti-bullying committee at the school and expressed regret for not acting sooner. She said that by confronting Jonathan, I had inspired other kids to speak up as well. I'm a cunning youngster who set Jonathan up. Because I was envious of him, Harris has been telling everyone who will listen. He is being believed by a number of family members, including my Aunt Sarah. She gave me a lengthy lecture over the phone yesterday, expressing her disappointment that I had destroyed a young man's future over adolescent drama. She agreed with my mother that I should have dealt with it inside the family, rather than embarrassing everyone by approaching the principal. I continue to reside at my grandmother's home. Since I'll be 18 in 4 months anyhow, she's really assisting me with researching legal emancipation. I have a strong case, according to the lawyer we spoke with, particularly in light of the current circumstances. I constantly getting these lengthy, tearful letters from my mom about how I'm ruining the family and how I'll regret it when I'm older. I no longer reply to them. It's unbelievable to me that she would put her marriage before her own son. I'm attempting to concentrate on my studies and maintain my marks at the moment. Despite everything, my grandmother has been incredible. She even made me a little study space in her guest room, just as I had at home. Reading my dad's letters is helpful on the days that are more difficult than others. It is as though he anticipated my need for his counsel years later. Right now, I'm simply attempting to get through each day, but I'll provide another update if anything noteworthy occurs. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support. Knowing that I'm not insane for advocating for myself is a huge comfort. Update 2, I'm still struggling to come to terms with all that transpired because things have taken an unforeseen turn. Karen, Jonathan's birth mother, sent me a Facebook message last week, which surprised me. She stated she wanted to meet to discuss what had happened after hearing about it from one of Harris's family. I was somewhat apprehensive at first. I wasn't sure what her angle was, and Harris had always portrayed her as this crazy individual who had deserted Jonathan. However, my grandma consented to accompany me, so last Saturday we met Karen in a coffee shop close to her home. Everything I believed to be true about the scenario was totally altered by what she told us. It turns out that Jonathan had previously engaged in severe bullying. Prior to my mom and Harris' marriage, he had received 3 suspensions from his former school for harassing other pupils. The most recent instance was very awful as a practical joke. He and his pals confined a child in the gym storage room for many hours. Following that episode, Karen had attempted to get Jonathan into treatment. In order to address Jonathan's violent conduct, she showed us past emails she had exchanged with Jonathan's school counselor, who strongly suggested a psychiatric assessment and treatment. Harris, however, had objected, claiming that Karen was attempting to portray their kid as frail and broken. When she handed us the records from their custody dispute, it was the true bombshell. Harris had obtained full custody because he had superior counsel, and had persuaded the court that Karen's insistence on treatment was an attempt to generate issues where none existed, not because he was the better parent. In fact, he had transferred Jonathan to my school because his previous school had threatened to expel him for one more offense, in addition to the marriage. As she was telling us all of this, Karen started weeping. She said that, although she had made an effort to remain involved in Jonathan's life, Harris had threatened to take legal action against her if she attempted to get in touch with his school or meddle in his affairs. She kept apologizing to me for not speaking up sooner, claiming that she was too scared of Harris to take any action. Harris had done this previously, which explains a lot of why he was so fast to threaten divorce if I didn't accept responsibility. Instead of genuinely assisting Jonathan in resolving his problems, he is more concerned with maintaining his reputation. He has been repeating this cycle for years. Last night, I presented my mother with all of this material. Karen had provided us copies of everything, including the court records, emails, and school reports, but I wasn't sure whether she would believe it. Mom went over everything, and I saw genuine comprehension appear on her face for the first time since this whole disaster began. At last, she broke down and said that she had seen Jonathan's conduct even prior to the event at school, but she hadn't acknowledged them because she was too scared of losing Harris. She related instances in which she had heard Jonathan mistreat other children when he believed that no adults were there, regarding how some parents had ceased allowing their children to attend study sessions at our home, about how she had observed my withdrawal and anxiety but had persuaded herself that was typical of adolescence. Mom moved out of Harris' place today. After seeing the facts, she completely changed her mind and is now staying with Aunt Sarah, yes, the same aunt who chastised me. Not as a result of Harris's ultimatum. Mom has already filed for divorce. She asserts that she cannot be with someone who would put the safety of a bully ahead of the welfare of other kids, even if he doesn't have that child. In order to get the custody agreement examined, Karen is collaborating with her attorneys. She has already discussed Jonathan's background and needs with counselors at a school in her state, and wants to move him there and get him into the therapy he ought to have received years ago. Harris is enraged that all of this has come to light. The most unexpected aspect? Our principal has been contacted by Jonathan's former school. They seem to be looking into how Jonathan's bullying accusations were handled and why his behavior was reported but then forgotten. There are indications that Harris may have been involved in it. But that hasn't been confirmed yet. All of this is still registering in my mind. In a sense, it's comforting to know that I wasn't insane and that Jonathan had a lengthy past that I was unaware of. However, it's disheartening to consider that perhaps none of this would have occurred if Jonathan had received assistance years prior, when Karen first became aware of the issues. My mother is always complaining that she should have done a better job of protecting me. At least she now realizes how horrible what she wanted me to do was, even if we're still not all right since there is still too much hurt. In order to understand why she was so ready to overlook the warning flags, she is discussing seeking therapy for herself. For now, I'm simply trying to concentrate on getting the school year off to a solid start, but I'll report again if something significant occurs. According to my grandma, I should be proud of myself for not only confronting Jonathan but also for being the one to end the years-long cycle of silence that had been shielding him. Report 3 months have passed since my previous report, and at last, things have begun to return to normal. I thought I should give you all a last update because a lot has changed. About a month ago, once my mom acquired her own house, I moved back in with her. Despite being smaller than our previous home, the flat nevertheless feels more like home. She continues to apologize nearly daily, and even though I've forgiven her, our relationship has changed. We both seem cautious now, as if we're worried about saying the wrong thing. Surprisingly, I chose to start family counseling 2 weeks ago. The counselor is assisting us in improving our communication and re-establishing mutual trust. There were some unsettling findings from the examination at Jonathan's previous school. It appears that Harris had been regularly contributing to the school's athletic department, which might account for the disappearance of several complaints against Jonathan. A complete investigation is currently underway by the school board, and a number of administrators have been placed on leave. Last month, Jonathan relocated to his mother's state and is now enrolled in a new school that focuses on behaviorally challenged adolescents. I've heard that he's doing better now that Karen has him in rigorous therapy. He apologized for everything in a lengthy Facebook message that he sent me. He talked about how therapy is helping him cope with his anger management difficulties, and how he's now realizing why he acted the way he did. I still haven't replied. I may do so in the future, but right now I'm not prepared. The school's anti-bullying group has flourished. The school administration is now taking these accusations much more seriously after we assisted a number of kids in coming forward with their bullying stories. Actually, I sit on the committee with Tommy, the freshman whom Jonathan harassed. He's grown to be the type of brother I imagined Jonathan would be, a little brother to me. Reading the remaining letters from my dad that my grandma sent me has been both devastating and therapeutic. In one of them, he expresses his desire that I would become a person who defends the rights of others, and even after all these years, he still seems to be directing me in some way. Last week, my mom's divorce was finalized. Harris attempted to argue against it, but he immediately changed his mind once mom's attorney presented the information regarding Jonathan's history and Harris's role in concealing it. Mom is also receiving treatment to help her understand why she was so ready to overlook Jonathan's bullying warning flags. She claims she lost sight of what was truly important, being a good mother, because she was so terrified of being alone once more when her father passed away. The most surprising thing that happened? Last week I received a letter from Karen. She expressed her gratitude to me for being the first to reveal Jonathan's situation. She claimed that after years of feeling bad about not being able to support her son, she has found peace in witnessing him finally receive the assistance he requires. As a thank you, she also wrote me a check for my education fund, which I was able to return with the assistance of my grandma. Accepting it didn't seem right. Next month, I'll graduate and move to another state for college. My dad left money for my schooling, and my grandma is assisting me with the money now that I've been accepted into a reputable computer science program. To have a new beginning. Ahead of me feels nice. Although fewer people now believe Harris, he continually disparages me to everyone who will listen. I've received apology from some family members who initially supported him, such as Aunt Sarah, who now gives me cookies every weekend and never stops telling me how pleased my dad would be. I've learned a lot about sticking up for what's right, even when it's difficult, from this entire process. I've discovered that you should continue to defend yourself, even if the individuals who are supposed to do so fail you. I'm grateful for everyone who supported me, especially my grandma, who taught me what true family support looks like. I'm no longer furious.